everyone, and welcome to the China EVs and More podcast, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility space. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which, of course, I encourage you all to do. A Left Coast Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, early good morning from my side. This is Lei Xing, your co-host, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode 239. Yeah, I'm a quick trip. I'm actually right close by Stanford. I'm in Menlo Park. I was attending an event yesterday where this company asked me to talk about the AVs. So it just completed and I'm heading back today. And this morning, we're going to talk about a lot of AV stuff. And also Merz, German's Chancellor Merz visit to China. But I just took a quick Tesla robotaxi ride this morning. I still had a bit of a jet lag. It was a quick 5-minute ride. Kind of boring. Nothing, no surprises. But there's still a safety driver. So yeah, we are 10 days into the year of the fire horse. And it just feels like things are galloping ahead. Pun intended, on all fronts. AVs, collaborations. I mean, it feels like a lot has happened.
Yeah, and now we hear that Stellantis is also looking at LeapMotor technology to incorporate it into their European vehicles. So the world as predicted is becoming real.
Yeah, the minute that this was announced, October 2023, so 3 months after Volkswagen invested into XPeng, we have 2 European companies are now depending on Chinese tech. They're heading this pack, right? We saw Merz saying it's amazing when he sat in the S-Class with Momenta inside. And it's a new era. It's a new era, I think, right? If people have not realized that yet. Where I was thinking about this in China for China thing, but I think that's new. That's old. This in China for China. Now, I think it's, if you want to win in the world, you have to win in China. I think that's the kind of the stance from all of these. We've heard some comments from these German car makers, right? Oliver Zipse, Ola Kalinius, Oliver Bloom, they just left yesterday, but they'll be back for the Beijing Auto Show. I mean, it's how times have changed. We talk about German engineering and Chinese innovation, but how long does German engineering last? That's their brand, right?
Well, I look at the U.S. automakers as looking at this as a different game because the Germans rely so heavily on the China market, whereas the Americans do not. So do the Americans or the Detroit 2.5 want to have a big piece of the China market? Of course they do. But now, and we should look at it as the legacy automakers using Chinese technology in China, and now with Ford and Stellantis, or Ford formally using Chinese technology for its new EV that's supposed to launch next year, and then Stellantis looking at the battery technology, the vehicle technology of LeapMotor for their mass market vehicles. This really kind of articulates that more and more legacy automakers are looking at the Chinese technology for outside of China. Stellantis is, of course, in a big hole. They reported $26.5 billion loss in 2025, and sales are down 3 or 4% from year over year in 2025. Filosa is the new CEO, so he has a blank slate. He has a clean slate. You know, this is only a matter of time before LeapMotor IP is in Dodge vehicles, entry-level Dodge vehicles and Ram vehicles. Mark it down. I'd said this before, and I'll say it again, it's inevitable. So whether or not Chinese EVs are actually hitting U.S. roads in the next 12, 18 months doesn't matter, because Chinese technology will hit U.S. roads.
Yeah, it's
within the
cutting
next couple
China
of
out
years.
is just impossible on many fronts.
And that's where we should be very clear, Lei. It's impossible. It's not very expensive. It's not one of those things where we could find alternate suppliers for X, Y, and Z. In this world currently, in the automotive space, there are only Chinese suppliers that can mass produce things. Now, we can pick, there's going to be people that pick and net, but I'm saying that there are European and Western suppliers that can provide e-motors and things like that, but not at the scale and not at the cost. So when we say impossible, what we mean is that unless we want $50,000 cars to cost $70,000, it's impossible.
I think there's still a role to play. For example, if you look at some of the signings or the partnerships that were signed. So actually, it's both ways, right? So BMW and CATL on that kind of the battery passport, right? The carbon footprint. And then on the other side, NIO with Bosch is not new because, interestingly enough, NIO already has the ZF steer-by-wire. But interesting that they signed this new partnership with Bosch, also encompassing steer-by-wire technology. So these German companies still have a role to play. The automobiles, right? Previously Conti, they're very active in China. Magna. So, right? Hello. Whether it's for show on paper or whether it's serious, we can debate about that. But the German or the European suppliers are no longer, where they are. Look at the spin-off that have happened over the recent few years, right? Even SKF, I think SKF just recently spun off the automotive. We know Conti right now is automobile, and more often than not,
is spinning off
right.
their wiring harness.
Yep.
And new company is called Versagent.
Right. And then the what was the other one that happened last year? I forget, but anyways. And also interestingly enough, we can compare during the Li Keqiang and Merkel days, how busy the Sino-China, Germany kind of the relationship. Every once in a while, you'll see these huge signings of deals. Those are gone. Those days are gone because now Merz, the geopolitical landscape is different, right? He's pressure from home. He's pressure from the US. He's pressure from the European Union. At the same time, you have the balanced interest of all of these German companies investing more and betting more in China. Yeah.
No, that's not to say that they're not also relying on the US, because companies like Porsche are relying even more heavily on the US market. Because although Porsche can't make up the $45,000 unit loss or 45,000 unit loss in the China market over the last few years by selling more into the US market, they're going to do everything they can while keeping prices high, which if we think about current consumer confidence in the United States, it's at very, very low. And so if Porsche tries to sell high margin vehicles and raise prices, there's going to be rich consumers that still buy it, but this could really, really backfire on them. And again, once we get into the electric vehicle space in the United States, eventually, Porsche's advantage is going to be taken away. Now, branding and heritage and loyalty is still there. It's something that the United States and Europe have that they don't have in China. But, how many people want to buy the 15 different variants of a 911? Because at the end of the day, their sales drivers are the Macan and the Cayenne.
Yeah. And then we saw some numbers, BYD up big in Europe, right, in January. The people that were in that economic committee meeting in Beijing, right? So Li Bin was there, Eric Li or Li Shufu was there, LeapMotor's chairman Zhu Jiangming was there, Lei Jin was there. Lei Jin, they're currently preparing this secret supercar launch or reveal. Apparently, I don't know if you saw the photos at the MWC in Barcelona. And while at the same time, interesting, the accident, now there's a verdict of what happened in that accident, the fiery accident that caused the death, right, last
So
year.
the
And now it looks like Lei Jun's under pressure to recall about 370,000 Su-7s. They recently already did a recall, but there's an issue with how the voltage shut down in that incident, which could not open the doors, right, or something. So there's always good and the bad, right? These things that you have to face and the opportunities. What's going to happen? The companies that they represent when it comes to Germany and Europe, right? We think about Xiaomi is going to enter Europe next year. Geely is already there. LeapMotor is already there.
I said this last episode or 2 episodes ago. The Xiaomi brand is going to do really, really well in Europe. So I'm telling you that right now. So mark this down on February 27th. Xiaomi, will it replace 911? No, but it E-Class, 3 Series, 4 Series, yes, it's going to have people move over from what would traditionally be Audi, BMW, and Benz's early buyers.
And the amazing thing about Xiaomi is not so much kind of the Porsche killer or the products. The main thing I think is its immunity over these negative publicity, unharmed to this point. The fan base is just huge enough where it doesn't matter.
Well, this is going to be really important for them to understand that the China market's going to be a lot, or the European market is going to be a lot different. So communication strategy, once there is some issue or challenge, hopefully nothing too major for them, but how they deal with it will go a long way in understanding how they want to portray themselves in foreign markets.
Yeah, and also in Europe, right, there's much lesser friction in terms of walls being set up. So in the US, there's several different types of walls. You have the 100% tariffs, you have the ICV ban, you have the dealer franchise laws. That just does not work the same in Europe, where you can have 2 different brands under the same roof, which Xpeng does. Very nice that on a very cost-effective basis. You can't have that in the US. At least, I don't know if it's ever possible. And then there's the
It's
other...
going to be tough. There are already dealers trying to line up to represent these Chinese brands. We know that in the United States anyways. And we also know that Trump is coming or going to China at the end of March. And so I think folks are anticipating that there's going to be some sort of announcement. Do I think that there's going to be a formal announcement about some sort of joint venture or partnership between 2 OEMs, a Chinese and a US OEM? I think that's too short of a time frame, but maybe some sort of announcement that says we've negotiated some arrangement that allows for that.
Yeah, I definitely see in Chinese it's called the Xi Te Hui, which means the Xi-Trump meeting for short. I think there's got to be something that comes out of that related to autos or trade, right? Generally in trade, because Trump, I think the Trump card is a card that's, you only have a small window. Once it's gone, that Trump card is also gone, I think. So there's 3 years left to get something done, I think. Because I feel like Trump and the Republicans somehow they seem to be more favorable than the Democrats toward China, because all the current wall set up was under the Biden administration, right? The tariffs are obviously...
I don't know, man. I think there's a fair number.
Yeah.
I think they're not openly vocal about it because Trump will slap them publicly, but that's not what I'm being told. I'm being told that there's major internal fights going on.
Yeah, and also the recent
how to approach this. So
there's several companies that were on the Defense Department list. It was put out and then it was taken back and then it was put out again. Neo, Baidu, I think Alibaba are all on that list, right?
Xiaomi was on it. But you almost look at that as like a negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on this list. We'll take you off if you do this. And let's just be honest with our audience, Lei. If there are no Chinese vehicles in the United States in the next 3 years, I'm very, very concerned for the U.S. automakers. They need that push. Ford talks about the UEV and Rivian has the R2, but
you have your connections and resources. I have mine. I'm hearing there's some tension. It's easy to put up a shop in Silicon Valley and think you can be innovative and be fast. But all of these legacy automakers, the cultural is difficult to change. It doesn't work as simple just putting up something here and you think it works, right? It's going to be tough.
But I will say this, living in Detroit, when we first landed back, or just outside of Detroit, if you want to get technical, when we first landed back in August of 2022.
That's a long time ago, huh?
There was, shoot, dude. There was no mention of the Chinese. People almost looked at me like I was an oddity because of the things I was saying in social settings, in formal meetings, in conferences, in potential client meetings. There was always one or two people that seemed to, when you're presenting something, Lei, and then there's shocked people. There's people that are like, I don't understand what Lei just said. Like, they can't compute it in their minds. And then there's people that are nodding their heads like, oh man, you know what I'm talking about, or I know what you're talking about because I experienced that now. And so the people nodding their heads has grown significantly over the last 3.5, almost 4 years that we've been back. And so they're getting it. But to your point, Lei, is it creating a reaction? And is that reaction fast enough? Is that reaction drastic enough? I think Ford is doing everything they can to get that UEV out by next year. But if we look at Rivian with the R2, that is so linchpin because it's not just important for Rivian. It creates the first domino of the affordable era of EVs without subsidies.
Like I tweeted, right? Make American EVs great again. Rivian's trying to do that. I think they're on the forefront. Ford is trying to do that. And that video that put out by Ford recently of, it was the single key word in that video was efficiency. To build something with kind of the stack, with the platform that Rivian talks about. Batteries, e-motors, manufacturing processes, right? This mega casting that they're doing. And they're just learning,
again,
right? It's not new. It's not new, right?
Well, that's what I want to emphasize. We got to stop there. This gets them to the starting line. It doesn't get them ahead. Yeah. Okay. And in order to get to the starting line, they need Chinese technology from CATL. Let's get that straight. Now, I'm not criticizing Ford. This needs to happen. And I'm actually very, very bullish on the vehicle being something that'll be good for the market. I think it's great. But the unfortunate thing is that there's only 2 or 3 of these things. We need 5, 7, 10 of these things.
I think what Jim Farley is not saying out loud is, he says, in order to compete China, we have to be innovative. But in order to compete with China, you have to work with China. He's not saying that out loud, but it's happening with the CATL LFP, right?
And let's break this down. So Ford has walked through that door. Stellantis has walked through that door, and the door meaning working with Chinese partners, okay, for technology. GM has not walked through that door in North America yet, but they've walked through that door in China through their investment in Momenta and the use of Momenta technology, intelligent driving technology for Buick and for Cadillac, which they have launched this year. So when we think about GM in North America, we think about Super Cruise. When we think about GM in China, we should think about Momenta. I don't know what it's called. Do you know what it's called in Chinese? The system?
Well, it's just the ADAS. There's no it's just the Momenta,
Yeah.
which is the driver
one
assistance
thing
system.
that is interesting, Lei, is I wonder how on a Mercedes versus a Buick, if there's any real difference between the feel of how the system works, or is it just basically the same exact system? Because if I'm Mercedes, I would want a premium feel. How do you make a premium feel in intelligent driving? I'm not sure, but I wouldn't want the same system as a Buick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, but well, obviously Mercedes and Buick, they have different, let's say, from an engineering perspective, tolerance for error, right? Whereas the Germans are probably very, very strict. And whereas the Americans might be a little bit less. So I think the system how it feels will be definitely different because you have to do it at the Mercedes standard versus at a GM standard. And then the fact that you have a small car like a CLA and then the big car like a S-Class all using Momenta is across different form factors. That'll feel different. So that's something that you and I, when we go back, right, we need to check out.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Not only the Chinese,
so we
right?
should
because
be
on Monday,
we should be careful on who we pick for our drive.
So on Monday, right, XPeng is announcing their VLA 2.0, which is their answer to the current Tesla FSD capability. And Volkswagen is the first foreign customer to adopt this, right? That's, again, another example of in China working with the Chinese companies to be able to sell and see how that works.
The fact of the matter is that everywhere we go outside of North America, we're going to see more and more Chinese vehicles.
And
that's the reality.
Just had Richard Hammond put out this video, right? I mean,
yeah, I saw that.
Of the VLA 2.0.
The one thing I was kind of thinking about this, Lei, kind of looking at sales numbers or something. I was looking at some report. You know what we haven't heard, or what brand we haven't heard of, or sub-brand we haven't heard about recently is Mona. So,
I mean, Mona, I say, well, we'll see how. I think their peak kind of is probably in the rearview mirror because now Mona is going to launch an SUV. So a cheaper priced, let's say a G6.
G6.
Right, a cheaper priced G6 is going to be Mona something. Yeah, right. I mean, in terms of products, we're getting close to the Beijing Auto Show, and these are tsunami coming, right? NIO recently talked about their schedule for the ES9 and the Envoy L80 launching in around May, June timeframe. ESA is still doing well, 70,000 units just delivered. Yeah, and the bloodbath, right? I tweeted the bloodbath is alive and well.
Yeah,
What's stopping the price war? Nobody's stopping the price war.
Now there's 7 years, 0% financing. It's unbelievable. It's a free car, basically.
Yeah, and Buick, right? They put out this promotion, $24,000 for Envision Plus, $24,000 starting price.
Well, I think people should double click on the CLA being as cheap as it is in China as well. After only having launched for 3 months, 4 months or something like that, less than that.
I think CLA, Mercedes is not saying it, but the CLA is their kind of the test bed of their next generation of new platform-based EVs. Mercedes, I think they're just going to say, they said that it's rather niche in the current Chinese environment. It's more niche than the CLA will be in Europe, but it's basically another way of saying not competitive. And now they want the GLC, which is more. They feel like it addresses the bigger market.
Well, the CLA is a sedan, number one, and
small sedan.
It can't compete. Yeah. It can't compete against the small sedans coming out of XPeng, BMW. XPeng, BYD, Geely, NIO,
LeapMotor.
it's getting
automakers.
beat up. And I think, in other words, what you're alluding to earlier, Lei, is this is Mercedes Neue Klasse kind of first attempt at rebranding or redefining what they are in the China market. The communication back from the market is back to the drawing board, guys.
Yeah, the
So
numbers are not pleasing, to say the least.
So we're getting into years of underutilized capacity in these factories for the legacy OEMs. We saw GM already right size with a $5 billion write down. And so we should likely start to expect more exports from Mercedes, BMW, Audi. And this is where it's key. Keep an eye on Europe, because the pressure to ship more units abroad, maybe to Japan, to Korea, to Australia, Chinese built ABB is going to be tremendous, because they're not going to make up those sales this year, in 1 year, in less than 1 year. So we always talk about Chinese exports into foreign markets, but the pressure on Tesla, on Mercedes, on BMW, and on Audi specifically is going to be enormous.
We heard about Volkswagen Anhui getting that approval. I think most recently BMW was the next one, possibly getting something. Right, the domino has fallen. And then what happens to the other Chinese brands? But yes, export is going to be a very important tactical way for not the Chinese automakers, but the foreign automakers in China exporting out of China. Hyundai, Kia are huge, already doing that. Volkswagen's already doing that.
And if you're a European, if you're a German, and you buy an E-Class that's built in China, how are you going to feel about that?
Yeah.
No, I'm not implying that the quality level of a Chinese built Mercedes and the German built Mercedes is different. There's a delta. I'm not implying that at all. But as a German, you probably want the German built E-Class.
Yeah, that's I think that's definitely a psychological barrier, even not mentioning the geopolitical.
We haven't even talked about technology, right? Because AI is disrupting everything. The United States and Europe have strong unions. And whereas China, now it's pretty well known that a lot of China automotive factories have a great deal of automation. First of all, how are the Chinese going to deal with that when they start building in North America, when they start building in Europe? Okay, because the U.S. government will, I'm certain, won't allow them to be much more automated than their domestic competitors building also alongside them in North America. So that's going to be kind of a challenge for them initially. For those that haven't seen it yet, there's that documentary, Made in America, about the
Fuyao.
Fuyao class.
Yeah.
So, and for those that are old enough, there's a movie in the 80s, I want to say, called Gung Ho. Did you watch that movie, Lei, or no? Do you know? You've heard of that movie?
Yeah, I heard of that movie. I haven't watched it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So it was it was Michael Keaton when he was much younger, and it was about a Japanese factory in the United States. And so it was comedy, but it was kind of apropos nowadays. And so, like, I've said this in the newsletter, and I'll say this again, this is not a powertrain race. This is not a powertrain competition anymore. It's a tech competition where the legacies in their domestic markets still have a chance, is if they're able to catch up really quickly. And with the restrictions that will inevitably be already thrown upon them in the U.S. market. So even when there's not 100% tariff, there's the Biden restrictions on connected software, there's the Biden restrictions on connected hardware. So that will constrain them from selling into the U.S. market. We're pointing back to the culture thing, right? Will they be able, the Detroit 2.5 specifically, will they be able to build this culture of technology, speed, risk-taking, and innovation in order to compete in the next 24, 30 months? Rivian, it sounds like, with their AI day, look like they were ready to do that. But Ford will have to just wait and see.
Yeah, I think if you have to pick your battles, and the Germans and the Americans are great contrasters, where the Germans are all in China and they move fast. They try to move fast in China because they're still a big market. Ford, GM, they're kind of GM's still big, Buick is still big, but um, they're not the same as the Germans, right? In terms of we're going to go in and try to do this. And for the Americans, they're more like we have to pick and choose, if not leave, right?
The irony for GM, Lay, and this is coming from a GM alum and someone whose family, many of them worked at GM. The irony is that GM is a truck SUV, big SUV provider in North America, but their sales volume is driven in China by small cars, by Wuling, by Baojun, by the smaller Buicks and things like that.
All this debate about, we look at the global automaker rankings. If you put Wuling into GM, you get ridiculed. But GM counts those in their global sales numbers. And then SAIC Motor, but Wuling and Baojun, they're Chinese brands, but they're sold by the joint ventures. So there's always that debate of what's correct in putting what kind of volume into which conglomerate. Yeah.
Baojun is a very young brand. It was specifically created for the China market by GM and SAIC.
But also interestingly, Shanghai GM, the current joint venture contract is up next year. And there's still no announcement yet what happens to that one.
They're deep in negotiations.
Yeah, I assume they will continue, but it's just how they're right-sizing and putting what type of investment. Because remember, they pulled out some investment. What's the financial term? Last year or the year before on the joint venture? GM, right?
It was last year.
The term? It's not a write-off, but right, it's a lot of decisions to be made.
Yeah.
So a little bit, we still have some time, a little bit on AVs. A lot of AV news, right? Wave getting that investment funding secured. Surprising to me, this is a UK company, right? Because when we talk about these tech innovators, we don't think of Europe or the UK. We think of China and the US. This Wave is just, seems like they're just coming on very strong because their idea is to put these AI software into all of these vehicles. Different brands, different automakers, whatever. They're closest to being a Western Momenta, I feel like. I don't know whether you agree on that, but because they play in both robotaxis and the level 2 plus. Kudos. And then you have this heavy giant Waymo now in 10 cities, 200 million miles. They want to do 1 million rides per week by the end of this year.
And they have their new driver. They have their new driver system. I think it's version 6. They've reduced the number of cameras by a significant amount. And so the hardware stack costs have been substantially reduced through their technology. Now with Wave, they have a philosophical difference in how they look at things. And Wave does use LiDAR, but it doesn't need maps. And it uses a predictive technology as opposed to existing infrastructure in order to move around the world. I think that's a big difference. The other thing that I want to point out about Wave is they had raised 1.2 or 1.8 or something like that billion dollars.
1.5 billion.
But if we look at Pony and WeRide, that values Wave higher than both of those companies.
Yeah, but
I'm sure WeRide and Pony would have something to say about that.
Right, and then some of the numbers I remember because I just talked about this yesterday. Pony is now doing in Shenzhen per vehicle per day over 26 rides, and supposedly the break-even economics is if it's above 20 rides per day per vehicle, they can get to break even in the big metropolis like Shenzhen. And then Baidu announced their numbers, right? Their numbers. They're entering South Korea. They've done 190 million kilometers, which is over 110 million miles of autonomous miles, driverless miles. They're in Hong Kong, right? And all of these Chinese AV companies are rapidly expanding in the Middle East, in the Gulf region. And Uber announcing this platform facilitating autonomous driving companies, right? UAM. All of a sudden,
And
right? You have
and
these.
to really
Yeah.
to kind of put some context to this, Uber or Waymo has about 14 to 1,500 vehicles on the road. Baidu has around 1,000.
Well, the
And then
big three in China all have over 1,000 now.
Pony and WeRide do
Pony and Radar,
each?
yep, they're over 1,000.
Okay.
I think
Because
Waymo latest number is 3,000, if I remember correctly, across their 6 cities, not counting the 4 ones they haven't launched, they recently launched. But what I was trying to say is now we're clearly seeing this battle of the verticals, right? So we have the Tesla and the Xpengs, the OEMs, we have the platforms, the Ubers and the Didis, and then we have these tech companies, the Waymos, the WeRides. I think jury is still out. Who's going to win this race? Because Tesla's FSD, Tesla's robotaxi, still a huge question mark. But once that happens, is it going to disrupt the Waymos? I don't know. That's ambition. That's Elon's ambition.
well, I think we should acknowledge the fact that the most valuable company in the world, NVIDIA is now throwing its hat into the ring. I don't think that we can underestimate Jensen Huang and his ambition. I think that they went from nowhere on the map, except for supporting the sector through providing some of the best silicon, to now I believe they are trying to bully OEMs into using Alpha and at least that's what I've been told. GTC is happening next month, which is their technology developer conference.
At least outside of China, right? So in China, for China, outside China, with somebody else.
But that's the thing, and let's be clear, Waymo is the only one that is publishing any of its intervention data. It's required to by California. Tesla has kind of pulled away a little bit because they got slapped by the courts in California with their intelligent driving. And so to me, and it's been a little while, obviously, for me and you riding in some of the Chinese ones, but it's not the distance between them. It's not that far from a look and feel standpoint. Do I feel safe? How is it reacting to certain conditions? I still think Waymo is the best, but that might be recency bias because I've ridden in Waymos in the last couple of months or whatever. But
I think for me,
Uber, I don't think we should underestimate Uber's role in this.
Yeah. Right. Being a facilitator, right? Because they have the users, they have the demand, they have the operations experience, fleet management. What I was going to say is that the robot taxis, once you do enough of these, I think the issue is not how it feels. It works. All of them, they work. The technology part of it is it's hard to differentiate. But at the end of the day, how much savings for you as a consumer? How can that be disrupted? A Waymo currently costs much more than a Tesla robotaxi. When Tesla robotaxi, when those Astras are gone and the real robotaxis, if I can get anywhere, if it flows like water, and it costs me much less than Uber or Lyft or Waymo, then we may have a disruption. How long are we from that point? We're pretty far. Right after this, let's say I need to go somewhere. I need a robotaxi, and it comes. I don't have to wait 1 hour, 20 minutes for the Zooks. I don't have to wait 20 minutes, 30 minutes for
well, it's going to be, these rides are going to be rich people's kind of service for a long while. Because honestly, at the end of the day, unless we get to the point where Waymo can provide rides for multiple people in one vehicle, then it won't be affordable to most, unless it can.
Yeah, and then there's what is the data on how many single or how many people ride alone on ride hailing? Maybe that's why Tesla is doing the Cybercab. There's only 2 seats. That's one way of doing it. And then you have this Ojai with a van that can seat multiple people. Yeah.
I
And
really look at it like, so Alphabet has a valuation of $4 trillion. Nvidia is 4.5 to 4.8 trillion. These are the leaders to me. Baidu is not close to a $4 trillion company, so they're going to need a lot of help. And then Pony and WeRide, you would think that they might be acquisition targets, because how do they compete with multi-trillion-dollar companies that are willing to continue to lose $1 billion, $2 billion a year in what feels like perpetuity, right? Now, we also know that Waymo is trying to line themselves up for an IPO, but right now the market for an IPO is not great. Will Waymo be oversubscribed? Probably, but will they extract the most value? Maybe not in this current environment. So
yeah.
how long do they wait?
And then last thing, we touched a little bit about this. I think the world is still marveling, myself included, over the Spring Festival Gala U-Bot. Last year it was the Young Bot. This year it was the U-Bot. So there's 4 companies, right? Unitree, Galbot, Neotix, and Magic Lab. Magic Lab is incubated through guess who? Dreamy. And I just feel like at this moment, it feels like 10 years ago for AVs, this hype on robots, this show, right? Much more show than dough. We're now talking about millions, hundreds of millions of miles, 100,000s of robotaxis hitting the streets, and the unit economics. What metrics should we measure the robots by? It's unclear at this point, right? So that's kind of what I feel, that we're starting this journey where the AVs started 10 years ago. Almost. This hype, right?
I also think it's really important, Lei, that we don't look at the humanoid and robotics as the same as EVs, because I think there will be a lot of losers in the China market, just because there are so many robotics companies that, and the international trade environment is a lot different too now. Whereas when EVs started being exported, there weren't tariffs. Now there's starting to be tariffs. And so the solar industry, the steel industry has really, and the EV industry has really kind of created this, we're going to reshore, we're going to manufacture again. So unless Unitree again is able to build domestically in any market that it wants to outside of China, if it's willing to keep all the data in that country on servers and it doesn't bring it back, but that creates constraints as well, because all of the data is one of the biggest advantages are for these companies. And so if I'm not able to combine it in any way to train the algo, then it creates challenges. And so I think the humanoid in China, I think we're going to see companies in the next 5 years that you've heard about and I've heard about probably go away, and a few really big ones kind of stand out.
The other thing to note about is all these 4 companies that I mentioned on the Spring Festival Gala, they're lining up for IPO, Unitree being at the top. And reportedly, they each spent close to 100 million RMB just to appear on the show. Okay. And they were designated different partners on the show, like, designated embodied AI robot or something, designated this partner and that partner. Right. Unitree getting this visit from Merce all ahead of this IPO this year. Probably going to be one of the major IPOs.
For sure. So I got my Mach-E.
So you finally pulled the trigger?
Well, it wasn't me. There's delivery challenges, and then Hyundai had some challenges with my Ioniq 5. And but it's 2 days old. I've put 30 miles on it, so I'm going to reserve. One thing that did freak me out, Lei, the range said 100%, or the battery said 100%, and the range said 237 miles. It's like, what? Anyways, it is like 30 degrees in Michigan, like probably similar to Massachusetts. So I'm hoping that spring and summer that gets closer to 270. But
So now
yeah.
we put our consumer hat on. What I'm going to talk about, don't look at us as kind of the China EV mobility experts or enthusiasts. Me being a consumer, I test drove the Rivian R1S this past weekend. And actually the
Nice.
universal hands-free was working on the local streets. Did pretty well because I've reserved...
In California or in Mass?
No, back in Massachusetts, Western Mass. I'll
Was it
post some
snowing?
videos. No, it wasn't snowing.
Okay.
I have an R2 on order, but at the same time, I'm really inclined for the Model Y for a few reasons that others still to this point have not overcome this moat or this competitive advantage. First of all, the supercharging network. Second, the 0.99% financing. It's almost close to free money. It's 72 months. Well, you can choose, but the monthly payment will be higher if you go lower on the month. I have already a plug at home. If you trade in a used car with Tesla, you get 2,000 free supercharging miles. So all of these in place is for me myself as a consumer, still very much leaning over to the Model Y, also because it is an established, mature product versus a R2, which is still starting production. The initial builds, how good are they? So I'm very close to...
Well, you might have to wait 12, 14 months to get to that $45,000 R2 price point.
Right.
The
so
initial set.
I think it's going to be a matter of weeks before I pull the trigger.
So as a consumer, but as a consumer who's looking to the future, I got a 2-year lease.
Yeah.
The cool thing, and I will give Ford kudos to this, is because I had originally tried to order this in August, remember, of 2025, before the $7,500 credits went away. And they honored the same deal. So they froze the pricing that I was supposed to get in August, which is awesome. Yeah. I'll spend a little more time next week after I've kind of gathered my thoughts a little bit.
Yeah.
I really like the Ioniq 5. I think the UX was not great, but generally the car is big and the kids fit in the back pretty well. So anyway.
And I just like what the RJ is doing as a being an American EV startup, really rooting for him to get over that hurdle of R2 being possibly a mainstream, good-selling EV like the Model Y. But, there's still questions.
So here are the biggest asterisks, right? Because at $45,000, the price is right. The feature set is rich. The vehicle looks great. It's about a foot smaller than the R1. So it's probably more practical for a lot of people in the United States.
For me as a family, yes, definitely, yeah.
And now it's, can they create the demand and then can they build to that demand? Because they haven't proved that they can do either with the R1. And so that's really, if they could do those two things, it's going to be a hit for sure.
You look at Lucid's numbers, you look at Rivian's number, they're still stuck in the low 5-digit volumes.
It's terrible. It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, but they have $100,000 cars, but...
Is it a demand problem? Is it a production problem? Maybe both, but...
Well, it is a little bit of a demand problem because the charging infrastructure outside of California is just not great.
Yeah. But R2 already has a native NACS. So... And many of these new EVs are going to have, even Hyundai are going to have native NACS.
So I, like you, am rooting for Lucid and for Rivian because I do want more competition to drive those prices down. And I think that Ford has shown us that they're willing to go low with the UEV. The Equinox, I was told, is selling pretty well for General Motors. Stellantis, they said, screw it. We're just going to build really, really big V8 trucks that just drink gas and then rely heavily on LeapMotor technology to get us on the low end. But all moving, the crazy thing is they're all moving in the right direction despite Trump gutting all the EV subsidies. Are they moving fast enough? Are their products compelling enough? Do they have enough product in the pipeline to stack really good vehicles, 6 months later, 6 months later, 6 months later? Or are they going to rely heavily on just one vehicle, on one product, on two products? Because the R3 is supposed to be coming out right after the R2. So hopefully we cannot have delays. We cannot have delays. And I mentioned that to Ford.
Yeah.
You say this date, you got to hit that date, and you got to hit that number. Okay, the pricing, the MSRP. So, anyways, let's go to comments and questions here. Jeffrey, hello. What's going on, buddy? SPX, who is always a loyal viewer and listener. Thanks for always joining us, man. How much market demand for transportation does the robotaxi industry create, or do they largely replace existing models, aka getting rid of the human factor in piloting vehicles?
So there's a good report from Barclays on physical AI. So physical AI, they define physical AI as autonomous vehicles, drones, industrial automation, and humanoid robots. They predict it's going to be a $0.5 to $1.4 trillion market by 2035, and half of that are AVs. So 550 billion, roughly. It's hard to say, right, at this point. But again, the robotaxis, the AVs, there's no longer show or dough. Now it's dough. It's scaling. Unlike robots, right now are more show.
But part of that show,
we haven't even talked about the Neolixes and the Zellos. Neolix recently gone through 100 million kilometers of logistics, unmanned logistic delivery vehicles. Tens of thousands running in multiple countries and cities.
Well, that's the fun part, right? We only talk about the passenger vehicle in robotaxi companies, but there's this on the commercial side, man. There's so many companies trying things. I told you I moonlight as a venture partner for a couple of VC firms, and I see pitch decks for an autonomous snowmobile company, snowblower company, not snowblower, snowplow company for airports. I've seen a good friend of mine, or a friend of mine, I won't say good, a friend of mine. He's the founder of Parallel Systems, who is doing autonomous rail cars. There's so much, and we won't be paying attention to it, but within the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be rail cars where there's nobody operating them, that they're going to pass by us. And we're already starting to see in Michigan in the summer and springtime, there are autonomous lawnmowers doing the highway stuff. So it's already happening.
Snowstorms, I think the autonomous snowplowers became a hit, I think, right?
Tom Malogny was doing a big thing, time-lapse thing.
Yeah. And then I just recently was talking and some idea about airports. You mentioned airports. There's a huge need of wheelchairs. And you don't believe how many people are hired just for bringing these wheelchairs to the door of the airplane to pick up people who have these needs. And there's some idea that these could be autonomous.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because there's an Italian company who just opened a sales office in Michigan, and they're doing that. They're doing autonomous wheelchairs. But again, in the West, anyways, when we think about this stuff, we have to think about the jobs that it's taking away. At least politicians will. So is the regulatory environment going to be right for the technology to ramp? That's the question, an important question that you should pay attention to, because listen to what politicians are saying. Because when we talk about automation in factories, I'm living in UAW country. That's probably anathema to all the labor unions. So when will we see North American factories and European factories look more like Chinese automotive factories? That could be 15, 20 years from now. Yeah. But these unions really, really have a lot of influence because of the voters and things like that. And honestly, man, I'm concerned as someone who have friends that could be displaced because of automation. I mean, AI is really creating uncertainty on the white collar stuff. But to answer your question, XBX, right now, the market demand is kind of artificial, but because trips are being subsidized, Cybercab, Waymo, now if they're to charge, fully burdened rates, then it would probably crater demand.
Yeah.
But that's why they need that scale too, right? To drive down those costs. And Waymo, Baidu, they're reducing the cost of their stacks, which should help the path towards profitability, but it's still going to be a number of years before real demand comes. And unless we get to the Ojai, where multiple people can take one trip, these services are really just for rich people. Jeffrey, the Taycan was a huge miscalculation by Porsche. It's been very costly. So the first few years of the Taycan, super good.
I've seen
people
more.
Figured out.
I've seen more Taycans here than I've seen the last couple of years. There's so many EVs here.
It's California.
Here every other vehicle is a Tesla, and it seems like one out of every 3 or 2 other vehicles is a Rivian.
I think the Taycan is great. It's just the range wasn't great, and the software sucked. And Porsche couldn't make major improvements through over-the-air updates, and demand just fell off a cliff. And the price was high for what you got. Changing with the times is very hard compared to China EVs, which move at light speed. The bang for the buck is huge in the Xiaomi brand. So I think that refers back to what we were talking about when I said that Xiaomi is going to do well in Europe. Let's see. Depends on, he's talking about Trump now, Trump's visit to China. Let's see. Depends on how much McDonald's hamburgers they feed him to get him to agree. So, and then he said, 2, you were way ahead. Without CATL is like going to a party without alcohol. It won't last. And Diane, thanks also for always joining the show. Congrats too on the Mach-E. Thank you, Diane. And Lei, she says, we have a 2023 R1T. Was expensive, but works well. And
okay.
I think finally, no. So Mike, the car geek, did you get Ford Power Promise? I did, Mike. So I'm going to get installation, and I'm going to get, I think it's a Ford Pro charger. I don't know what the speed is, but that was one of the reasons I kept at the Mach-E, because of the Ford Power Promise.
See, we all love a good incentive as consumers.
Yeah, dude. Diane has like 70 cars. Diane's like, I have an Ioniq 6, but I like the blue Nissan SV and want an R3 used someday. Mike, good vids on Donut Labs. My pleasure.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought this was going to be like a 30-minute freaking show.
It never is we can never do 30-minute shows. We just go on and on, right? It's hard to be compact.
But we're back on schedule. We took a week off because of Chinese New Year, but we are back on schedule. We will see everyone next Friday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, Fridays. Yeah. Eastern.
Thanks again for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China EVs and more.